搁这儿。那我问一下，这个哥们不来了，要我删掉吗？删掉了。他上午测的时候，他们说 not sure， 但是 video 是好的。那个张教授那边已经上线了。
Raven, is there something wrong with the sounds?
None, sir. It's just that if I click add meeting room, the sounds stop, but it's working.
Okay, okay.
张教授，
Hello.
你好，你好。他那个给张教授打开一下。听得见吗？给张教授打开一下。今后我要让他说主持的这几个人一定要让他们先打开。
Raven, please unmute Professor
Jeffrey,
Zhang.
how are you?
Hello,
Yes.
Ambassador. Very
Yeah,
good. Very
good, great. Yeah, Professor Zhang.
Raven,
Thank you
please
so much.
unmute
Yeah.
Professor
Oh,
Zhang.
yeah. 跟他说张教授。
That's working.
可以，
能够听到我的声音吗？
可以听到了，感谢啊，张教授，感谢你接受邀请，对我们很荣幸啊。
谢谢你，谢谢你。
对，这个主持的这个年轻的小伙子是 Jeffrey Nang， 他是这个非中了解协会的总裁。Jeffrey, this is Professor Zhang. He's a leading professor in China. We are great honor to have him with us today. Yeah.
Yes, very distinguished. Thank you, Professor, for agreeing to talk to us this afternoon.
And this is a hot topic, and a lot of people are interested in this topic. That's China's approach to modernization. Yes.
We should start on time. Or we should wait for a few minutes.
We will start on time. It's now 2:57. We start in 2-3 minutes. Yeah, not exactly 3 p.m.
我每次活动在这，你跟他们说一下，你跟那个谁，或者跟那个谁说。对，就让他们把这个一点提前抽一点。我看张教授今天晚上您还有一个千人礼堂，还有一个演讲是吧？还有一个讲座。
没错，我今天原来说想在复旦在家里，我给你做一个。
哦。对，我
北外校庆，他们叫
对北外校庆，您也是北外的校友啊。
我在北外待过2年啊。
哦，在那待过2年，对，我看到我看到一个预告了，对。
对。
那场还不是对外公开的，好像晚上还参加不了。
我还真不知道，这个他们安排的。
好。来。给我。时间到了吗？那个张教授，我这样的，我在东盟的时候啊，我在那边给设立了一个这种叫做中国东盟关系那个叫雅加达论坛。对，那边的话呢也好几年了，就等于是请各种名人来讲，效果挺好，所以很期待啊，感谢啊。
现在这个是 Manila Forum 啊。
对，这个 Manila Forum。这是一个 bilateral， 那个是一个 multilateral， 对。Jeffrey, send my regards to Lampino, please.
Yes, he's recovering from COVID, so
I see. Okay.
He's post today. Yeah. So hopefully we're all praying for his swift recovery.
Yeah, that's right. If he needs some Lianghua Qingwen, please let me know.
Yes, we'll let you know. Thank you, Ambassador Huang.
Okay.
It's almost 3 p.m. So
yes.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Everyone to the second Manila Forum on Philippine-China Relations, organized by the Association for Philippine-China Understanding, or APCU, and the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Manila. We are holding this as a follow-up to the successful first Manila Forum with Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank President Xin Li-Chin, and this will become a continuing series. I am Jeffrey Nang, President of APCU, and your moderator this afternoon. To start with, we will call on General Fernando Pache, Treasurer of APCO, to give the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Let us bow our heads and place ourselves in the presence of God. O God and Heavenly Father, grant to us the serenity of mind to accept that which cannot be changed, courage to change that which can be changed, and the wisdom to know the one from the other. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, General Pache. We will now start the forum with the opening message by APCO Chairperson Emeritus President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo.
His Excellency Ambassador Huang, President Jeffrey Zhang, and the other officials and members of APCO, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to join you in welcoming Professor Zhang Weiwei and the participants to this second forum on Philippines-China relations. I congratulate APCO and the Chinese Embassy for your efforts to deepen the relations between the Philippines and China through events like this, as well as for your choice of the theme for this forum. China's world-leading period of growth that has brought it to the cusp of being the largest economy in the world was unleashed over 40 years ago, since China's bold and historic policy of reform and opening up in 1978. Its achievement has lifted more than 850 million Chinese people out of poverty. With several APCO members, I first visited China in 1977, before it began its period of opening and reform. We took a rickety 4-hour train ride to Guangzhou with a pit stop at the then small city of Shenzhen because there were no lavatories in the train. In Beijing, we stayed at Beijing Hotel, the only hotel available then for foreigners. Then we went to Shanghai, Hangzhou, and Hunan, where Chairman Mao began the long march towards the Chinese Revolution. Then we asked to go to Tachai, which was at that time touted as the ideal commune. In December 1978, I returned to China with my parents and 2 siblings. At that time, in December 13, 1978, Deng Xiaoping launched the period of reform and opening up that has now entered its 5th decade and is still ongoing very strongly. If I were to characterize what happened in China from that time to today, there is one word to describe it: breathtaking. In this forum, we look forward to Professor Zhang enlightening us on what China did the last 43 years to achieve such breathtaking success, and how we all stand to benefit in the community with a shared future for mankind. Mabuhay and Sheshe.
Thank you, Madam President. Now for the welcoming remarks, we'll call on the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China in Manila, Ambassador Huang Xilian. Raven, Ambassador is on mute. Can we unmute Ambassador Huang? Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. Your Honorable Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, former President of the Republic of the Philippines, Honorable Jeffrey Nang, President of the Association for Philippines-China Understanding, Professor Zhang Weiwei, Director of China Institute at Fudan University, distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. I'm delighted to meet you online at the second Manila Forum for Philippine-China relations, the theme of which is China's approach to modernization and its implications. Being an essential part of human development and progress, modernization charts the course for diversified civilizations around the world. For quite some time, the Western model of modernization has taken domination, as evidenced by the stereotypical notion, such as modernization means westernization. As a consequence, quite a few countries have fallen into development traps and remained stagnated by indiscriminately following the Western rules to modernity. In contrast, China has stayed committed to pursuing its own path, readily drawing on the prominent achievements of other modern civilizations, thus achieved industrialization in just a few decades, which took developed Western countries several centuries. Through arduous trials and practices, we have pioneered a new and unique path to modernization of Chinese style. As it turns out, westernization is not a panacea for all, and developing countries should explore their own approaches to modernization. We never tell others what is the best, but we always remind ourselves that the suitable one is the best. A world of peace and development should embrace civilizations of all forms and must accommodate diverse paths to modernization, while regard democracy as a natural right for the people of all countries to choose and enjoy. Modernization ought to be advanced in a tailor-made way, rather than trimming the feet to fit the shoes. Wearing shoes that do not fit will only cause pain, while forcibly pressurizing unsuitable situations will only lead to distress. Take China, for example. China's approach to modernization has been gradually formed and ameliorated over the past 100 years under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, which is not only deeply rooted in its tradition, history, and reality, but also absorbed advanced experiences of other countries' modernization. It is not just a renewal of Chinese history and culture, neither is it a copy and paste of the envisioned practice in classic Marxism works or foreign modernization models. China's path to modernization stands out by keeping abreast of the times and fitting itself. As President Xi Jinping puts it, China's modernization must cover a massive population, lead to common prosperity, deliver both material and cultural ethical progress, promote harmony between humanity and nature, and proceed along a path of peaceful development. Our journey ahead will be a long and challenging one, but as long as we press forward with perseverance and wisdom, there will be much to expect. China always appreciates and respects countries that independently explore the path to modernization in light of their own situations. We are willing to share experiences in this regard with all other countries, including the Philippines, so as to achieve common development and prosperity for mankind. I would like to thank the APCO for thoughtfully organizing this forum and extend my appreciation in particular to our keynote speaker, Professor Zhang Weiwei, a top and leading scholar on China and international politics. I look forward to his perspective and insights on China's approach to modernization. I wish the second Manila Forum for Philippines-China relations a complete success. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you, Ambassador Huang. To now introduce our guest speaker, we will call on Vice Chairman Sixto Benedicto.
Good afternoon, His Excellency Ambassador Huang Xilian and our beloved President of APCO, Jeffrey Nang. Allow me to introduce our second Manila Forum speaker, who is a leading thinker from China. He is a distinguished professor of international relations and director of the China Institute at Fudan University, and a member of China's National Think Tanks Council. He holds a doctorate degree in international relations from Geneva University. He is one of the most influential Chinese political scholars and at home and abroad in the study of Chinese way, Chinese models, and Chinese discourse. In 2016, he was named the top 10 Chinese think tanks of Guangming Daily. In May 2021, Professor Zhang joined the 30th Collective Study of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee, which was presided over by Chinese President Xi Jinping, with the theme of strengthening China's international communication capabilities. He had worked as a senior English interpreter for Deng Xiaoping and other Chinese leaders in the mid-1980s. He has traveled to over 100 countries. He is the author of the best-selling and award-winning China trilogy, published by the Shanghai People's Press, of Zhongguo Chudong, the China Ripple, Zhongguo Zhenghan, the China Wave, and Zhongguo Zhaoye, the China Horizon. And the English edition of the latter two were published by World Century New Jersey in 2012 and 2016, respectively. He first predicted that the Arab Spring would soon become the Arab Winter in a much publicized debate in 2011 with Francis Fukuyama, the author of The End of History and The Last Man. His works include Ideology and Economic Reforms under Deng Xiaoping, Transforming China Economic Reforms and its Political Implication, and Reshaping Cross-Strait Relations, Ideas and Reflections. He has written extensively in Chinese and English on China's political and economic reforms, the China model of development, the China's foreign policy and comparative political governance. Without much ado, may I present to you Professor Zhang Weiwei. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Honorable President Arroyo, Your Excellency Mr. Ambassador Huang Xilian, and Your Excellency Chairman Jeffrey Nang, and other friends from APCU. Very much honored to be invited to speak at this second Manila Forum, and all the greetings from China. So the topic I will share with you today is my own research and study on what I call the Chinese approach to modernization and its possible implications. As you all know, China has experienced a rapid dramatic change over the past decades. Indeed, 4 decades ago, China, in terms of per capita GDP, was lower than most African countries. Now, China is the world's second largest economy by nominal GDP and the largest economy by purchasing power parity. And China has created the world's largest middle class, over 400 million. And these are real middle class. Even they go to United States, Europe, they're also middle class, people with properties, with decent income. China has also eradicated extreme poverty, which is a remarkable achievement. And this level of lifting extreme poverty is by no means easy. Roughly 800 million people were lifted out of poverty. And this standard is reasonably high. It's much higher than the World Bank requirements. They include not only a reasonable income, but also guarantee for education, for medical insurance, for housing. So now we can say with certainty, China has zero abject poverty. And furthermore, China has also achieved medical insurance for all and pension for all. This is also a remarkable achievement, which outside world may not know very well. And also there are other achievements. For instance, China exported roughly 170 million tourists abroad in the year 2019, before the COVID-19. So all this shows the tremendous tremendous progress China has registered, and which is indeed impressive, unprecedented even in human history. And I can describe China's rise from another angle. From my own study, roughly over the past 4 decades, every 10 or so years, or 10 to 15 years, China went through one industrial revolution. So now we talk about the first industrial revolution that started in UK for textile industry. So China completed that, its own first industrial revolution, by the year 1995. By then, China became the world's largest trader and producer of textiles. And then came the second industrial revolution, which at that time, 200 years back in Europe, was a power industry. And China became the world's largest producer of electricity by the year 2010, more than the United States. At the same time, its manufacturing industries, its infrastructure have all vastly improved by the year 2010. And then came the third industrial revolution, marked by computer and telecommunications. Indeed, as shown in our personal use of the smartphones, from 2G to 3G, in both 2G and 3G, China were way behind. But in the 4G era, China became a leader. China has its own standards on a par with the Western countries. And now in 5G, China is a leader, if not the leader, in this whole domain. And now, China is in the Premier League of the fourth industrial revolution, known for AI technology, for big data, for quantum computing, etc. And I personally think China and the United States are the only two countries, not Europe, not Japan, not other countries, are in this Premier League. And China is in many ways, perhaps to my mind, in a slightly better position than the United States. So these are remarkable achievements. We talk about the history of the People's Republic of China from 1949 up to now, over 70 years. During the time of Chairman Mao, what we call the first 3 decades, Chairman Mao laid a foundation, political, economic, social foundation for China's rise. And 4 decades ago, China began its economic takeoff and achieved remarkable successes, as I just now described. Yet, if you look at the literature in the West on how China has made it, usually there were quite a few explanations, which to my mind are not very convincing. One, of course, is market economy. Yes, the market economy has played a very important role in China's rise. But in the world today, most economies are market economies, but most economies have not achieved what China has achieved. And another explanation is that China has attracted a lot of foreign direct investment, FDI, which is true. But again, some countries have attracted more FDI, especially in per capita terms. The whole Eastern Europe has attracted far more FDI in per capita terms than China. But there are no Eastern Europe economic miracle. And there was also another explanation. China offered cheap labor. Yes, for some years, and China indeed offered less expensive labor. Actually, labor cost in China has gone up sharply. Now, China labor is no longer cheap, so sometimes can be considered rather expensive. Another explanation, which the Western countries try to describe, is called the authoritarianism. Again, by Western definition, so many countries are authoritarian, yet very few of them have achieved what China has achieved. There must be something unique, different, something that China has done right, and that can explain China's dramatic rise. And I would call this the China model, or the Chinese approach to modernization. That's a topic which I want to share with you. It's my own research, my own findings, and for your reference. And essentially, I try to, given the limited time available, I try to summarize this Chinese approach into the following dimensions. In the political domain, it's a model which can be called selection plus election. If the Western model is about election, the Chinese model gives top priority to selection. Basically, if you look at the top echelon of the Chinese leadership, the top 7 leaders in China, most of them have served twice or 3 times as #1 of a Chinese province, which means at least they have governed over 100 million people for many years before they were given the chance to serve as top leadership. Leader like Xi Jinping, he served as party secretary and governor for 3 provinces. So this is not only serve 2-3 terms, but also you have to perform and perform well. So this is very important. Selection first, then election. Economically, it's what I call mixed economy. In other words, the state plays its role. The market also plays its role. They complement with each other. The state-owned enterprises plays its role, and private sector also play its role. They complement each other. A good example is China's rapid growth of the e-commerce. Today, China e-commerce, I think, is more than half of the world's total. And behind this, it's a very typical case of mixed economy, where the state laid the foundation for infrastructure, for bullet train, fast speed train, for highways, for 4G service, 5G service, down to every village. This role has to be played by state enterprise. The private enterprises like the United States, they don't want to go to the vast countryside to provide networks, which will not make money. In the case of China, the state enterprises play such a role. And they have dynamic private sector in the Chinese e-commerce, e-businesses. So this good combination produces this dynamism in the Chinese economy. And in the social domain, it's what I call a positive interaction between the state and society. If the Western model is more or less state and society are locked in confrontation, As a result, the Chinese society is both dynamic and at the same time rather integrated and united. And the Chinese state at all levels responds to the needs of the people much faster and much more efficient than the Western model, as shown in this ongoing fight against COVID-19. Today, you live in China, you are at least 200, 300 times safer than in the UK or the United States. By saying this, I'm being very modest. Actually, if you look at the figures, even higher in terms of safety from contracting disease and safety from dying from the COVID-19. Behind this is, of course, we think we have a better model and then in terms of mobilizing society and getting people united to fight the disease with determination and with impressive record. And with this kind of model, what I would emphasize, China has become in a very interesting, unique position. As a scholar of international relations, when we analyze international order, international system, a phrase often comes to our mind, which is called center periphery. Center being the Western countries, peripheral being the non-Western countries, especially the developing world. Where the center, due to its whatever wealth accumulated before, its current position in the international system, its military might, its whatever positions, privileges in the current international system, they really reap huge profits. At the same time, developing countries, peripheral countries live in the margin of the world economy. They provide raw materials, cheaper manufacturers, whatever. So with the rise of China, China has successfully broken through this system. It's a breakthrough, remarkable breakthrough out of this order. So today, China itself is an independent pole outside this center peripheral order. China is simultaneously the largest trading partner, investment partner, technology partner with the central countries, rich countries, and with the developing countries, peripheral countries. So this is the reason why when the so-called China-US trade war broke out, imposed by Donald Trump on China, I was being one of the very few scholars in the world. I said, the United States will lose this trade war. The reason is very simple, because China is an independent pole. And China, as we can see, at the very beginning in the year 2019, China-US trade dropped sharply, roughly 10%. Yet China trade with ASEAN countries grew rapidly. Today, ASEAN is China's largest trading partner. Same with China trade with Africa, China trade with Europe. So China is now the only country that can produce and export and provide goods, services from all the four industrial revolutions, first, second, third, and fourth. No other country can do that. The United States cannot do that. As a result, I think the United States will lose this trade war. It is losing. I just read the latest statistics. United States companies and consumers bear roughly 93% of the tariff increase, the cost of tariff increase. The Chinese bear roughly 7% maximum. So behind this is really the rise of China and change the position of China in the global order, in this so-called outside the central peripheral order. And behind all this is another very important. I describe China's rise as the rise of a civilizational state, which means an amalgamation of the world's longest continuous civilization with a super large modern state, which has made China rise very interesting and fascinating. And for instance, when I say China's civilization state, I want to emphasize that it is in many ways unique. For instance, if you look at the China model, we have the Communist Party of China, CPC, as a ruling party. The United States always blame, you have a one-party structure. It's not democracy. I said you fail to understand the basics about China and Chinese history. I said China had been practicing a kind of one-party state for over 2,000 years. Indeed, as a civilizational state, China was first unified in 221 BC. Since then, in most cases, China was unified. And China was always governed by a unified ruling entity. So I describe the Chinese Communist Party, CPC, as a continuation and evolution of that tradition. I use another term I call a holistic interest party, vis-a-vis the Western model, which is I call partial interest party or partisan interest parties. These are very different because a civilizational state like China is the product of its own history. It's a product of hundreds, thousands of states amalgamated into one over its long history. If you look at the population of China, I said this to my European friends. In Europe, each country in average is 14 million people. China is 1.4 billion people, which means China's size of roughly 100 average European states put together. So for this kind of state, its governing political culture, its political culture for governance is of course different from a European country, from the Western model. Actually, China practiced Western political model, so-called multi-party system or partial interest political party system. When China introduced that in the year 1911, what we call the Republican Revolution, then China degenerated into chaos, into warlords fighting each other, millions of lives lost. So in China, it's a common sense to rule a country like China, the size of China, a civilizational state. It has to be governed by a unified ruling entity. Our ancestors knew that. Chinese people today know that. So CPC is the institution. Yet within the CPC, we have all kinds of voices. What we practice is called democratic centralism. You have democracy, you have all kinds of voices, then you reach consensus and you work on consensus. The Chinese decision-making process is called the democratic centralism. It's something China borrowed from Soviet Union and then reformed it, adapted to Chinese political, economic, and social conditions, which is very important in terms of the quality of decision-making. You have to listen to the people. You have to go to the people. But you cannot just listen to public opinion. You should also know the long-term interest of your people and your country. Then you reach consensus. You go through several rounds from the people to the people, to the people, from the people, from the people to the people, and you reach quality decision. In the Chinese governance culture, which is behind the Chinese model, we have a clear distinction between what we call the Mingyi, which means public opinion, and then Mingxing, which means hearts and minds of the people, or the long-term overall interest of your nation. So public opinion, 民意, may reflect long-term interest and may not reflect long-term interest. So to govern a country like China, you must know the long-term interest. That's why China is a unique country that we can plan for the future with 5-year plans. Now we are putting forward into operation the 14th 5-year plan. And we have also yearly plan and also longer plan. And General Secretary Xi Jinping described this 200 years objective, yeah, 2 centenary objectives. So this is something part of Chinese culture and civilization, yet it's also very modern and very important. And this is, so I've discussed the Chinese model and governing philosophy. I also want to mention another aspect of the Chinese governing philosophy, which I call the people-centered development, which is very different from the American model, which is voters-centered development. The two are very different. Before, if you look at big data, in the United States, the turnout for general election is roughly 55%. In other words, you have 100 persons eligible for voting, only 55 go to the voting. And out of this 55, you only need to get 51%, you win. So this is what they call procedural democracy. Yeah. But this is indeed voter-centered. It's not people-centered. People-centered development is you take really the overall interest of vast majority of your people into consideration. So this is different. And another important governing philosophy is what I call people's livelihood first. This is again very much in the Chinese Confucian tradition. Whatever you do in political reform, economic reform, social change, you must try to do something tangible. Everything boils down to delivering things tangible for improving people's life, both material life and non-material life, so cultural life, etc. So this is very much part of the Chinese model and the philosophy behind the Chinese model. And I'm glad that just now our host mentioned my debate exactly 10 years ago with Professor Fukuyama in Shanghai. And at that time, Egypt, Arab Spring occurred. And he said that China will also go through Arab Spring. Because from his end of history thesis, of course, now the Arabs want democracy, whatever. Now, next, China. But I said, having visited Egypt 4 times, I think main problem is with Egyptian economy. It did not have a manufacturing sector. It could not create enough jobs. So I made a prediction. I said Arab Spring will soon become Arab Winter. In the end, it became Arab Winter. So it's an unfortunate result, but from Chinese experience, from my field investigation in Arab world, it's predictable, it's inevitable. I also made another prediction in my debate with him, where he said that China needs to have a political reform. China should have a multi-party system and one person, one vote. I said both China and the United States need political reform. But from my own research into the American political system, I think the US political system needs more reform, more urgent reforms than the Chinese. In the case of China, all political reform has been going on all the time, sometimes small, sometimes slightly bigger, sometimes bigger, but it's non-stop. But the American political system is a product of the pre-industrial era. So I made a forecast. I said, without substantial political reform, my concern is the United States may elect a leader worse off than George W. Bush. At that time, his approval rate was already 20%. And so in the end, my prediction turned out to be also correct. I also made another prediction. I said, given the nature of the American political system, you are going to have what I call the simple-minded populism, which you cannot control it, which will lead to your decline, inevitable decline. That's my prediction 10 years ago. And he said, we have Abraham Lincoln, great American president. And he once said, you can cheat some people some of the time, but you cannot cheat all the people all the time. I think he's being slightly naive. Given the involvement of money, given the involvement of new social media, this simple-minded populism, this extremism, tendency towards extremism, become stronger and stronger. As a result, the United States is deeply divided. So many things we see today, whether failing Afghanistan, failing Arab Spring, and divided problems in the United States, all these are also predictable. I counsel my American friends, try to learn something from China. And we started our reform from a basic concept called the emancipation of the mind, 解放思想. In other words, you are ready to open to embrace new ideas, whatever successes other countries have created. Try to learn something from others' experiences. And then I said another philosophy is seeking truth from facts, not from dogmas, whereas the Soviet dogma or the American dogma about democracy. No, we look at the facts. So I put forward this whole idea. I said we need a paradigm shift from the American talk about so-called democracy versus autocracy to a new paradigm I call good governance versus bad governance, focusing on good governance rather than whatever other ideologies, how to deliver and try to know how most ordinary people want and deliver and meet their needs. And this is the message of the Chinese success. And I started to question the American model long time ago. I visited over 106 countries by the year 2006, which means 15 years ago. So I began to write my China trilogy and unexpectedly became a bestseller in China. And at that time, I also contributed articles to English American journals. I remember I contributed one article to New York Times. At that time, it's called the International Herald Tribune. Now it's part of the New York Times International Edition. The title of my article is The Allure of the Chinese Model. Basically, if you are interested, you can refer to that article. It's published in 2nd November 2006. I said, over the past 25 years, I've traveled to more than 100 countries, most of the developing ones, including 18 in Africa. I've concluded in terms of eradicating poverty and helping the poor and the marginalized. The Chinese model, however imperfect, has worked far more effectively than what can be called the American model. I said the American model is largely ideology-driven, with its focus on mass democratization, with little regard to local conditions. It treats sub-Saharan Africa or other less developed countries as mature societies in which Western institutions will automatically take root. The paramount task for most developing countries is how to eradicate poverty, a root cause of conflicts and various forms of extremism. As I said, the Saudi American model remains unable to deliver the desired outcome from Haiti to Iraq to Afghanistan, as shown clearly. The Chinese model may become more appealing to the poor countries in the world. And so this is my humble opinion, officially published in the American mainstream media 15 years back. And by this, I try to say that, things, you have traveled a lot in different parts of the world. You seek truth or facts. You come to this very simple conclusion. The American model will not work for non-Western countries. And the latest example is, of course, Afghanistan. Behind this is my analysis of the defects of the Western political system or political model. 3 defects. One is the assumption human beings are rational. You can cast in a rational vote. The second, rights are absolute. They don't talk about obligations, but only rights. And number 3, procedures are always the most important. Procedures are important, but when this becomes dogma, countries will suffer. So there are so many countries in the world that adopt the Western political system, but unless they can somehow reform these 3 defects or overcome some of these defects, otherwise these countries will, I think, suffer from the consequences of these defects. So if there is a key message from the Chinese approach to modernization and the China's relative success, I think it's a famous line from Chairman Deng Xiaoping. That is, every country should try hard to find its own way for success, for modernization, in the light of its own national conditions, rather than copying any other country's models. So China has been doing that way. I hope other countries will do the same, explore their own way forward. Okay, my time is up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zhang, for your exhaustive and comprehensive analysis of China's modernization and its implications. Professor Zhang has graciously agreed to answer some questions during our open forum. For our first question, in the 1980s, you served as the interpreter of Chairman Deng Xiaoping, who has played a historic and vital role in China's modernization. What lessons personally on modernization have you learned from him? And what insights, impressions do you have of Mr. Deng's vision, thinking, and character?
Well, thank you for this great question. And Deng Xiaoping is the architect of China's tremendous change. I'll just give you an example. When I was working for him, he was already in his early 80s. And he was a leader who focused on long-term issues with a tremendous long-term vision for his country. So he always talked about things which may not materialize in his lifetime. 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So that impressed me a lot. Another important aspect is his whole thinking about globalization. In 1980s, the globalization was pushed very hard by the United States, by Europe, by the Western countries. So China was faced with a choice whether China should embrace globalization or not. I remember quite a few African presidents came to China and consult Chairman Deng Xiaoping. How should we do with globalization? How should we deal with the West? And Deng said, globalization is a perhaps unstoppable trend. Yet it's a double-edged sword. So we should make best use of its advantages and guard against its disadvantages. 趋利避害. So Deng made an analysis. Deng said globalization pushed forward by the West was both political and economic. For China, China embraces only economic globalization, not the political globalization. You know, at that time, Gorbachev embraced both political globalization, mainly so-called democratization, privatization. China said, Deng Xiaoping said, we embrace only economic globalization, not political globalization. And then within the economic globalization, China became wide open to foreign investment, to international trade, but China was very cautious in certain areas where China was indeed, for all kinds of reasons, weak or not strong. A good example is China has been very cautious on the opening up of its capital market. Yeah. So in the end, in retrospect, we see this has saved China from many economic crises, financial crises, say the 1997 Asian financial crisis. China was freed from that. And then 2008, US financial storm, Wall Street crisis. And now I think another crisis is coming in the United States, new financial crisis. The Chinese model, China model is the only way that we can prevent this crisis. So this is my brief answer to your question on Deng Xiaoping. So visionary leader with a long-term view and made very hard decisions, choices for China. It turned out to be right.
Okay. Very good answer, Professor Zhang. Another question. The Philippines has followed liberal democratic political system of the United States of America the past 75 years since Philippines independence, wherein anyone can literally become president through direct elections. Despite the political differences between China and the Philippines, is there a lesson or some lessons the Philippines can learn and apply in the rise of modern China over the past 40 years?
And I think, each and every nation need to find its own political system suitable for its national conditions. And in the 21st century, in the era we live now, I think it's crucial that a country needs to have capacity for reform. China needs reform, United States needs reform, European countries need reforms, Philippines need reforms. In many ways, it's a competition between to what extent you can reform yourself so as to adapt to the changing pace, changing times, and whatever, new technology and transformation of the societies. And the Chinese experience has this to offer, because again, it's the wisdom from China's historical tradition. In the Chinese language, we have a concept called the Dao, or the way, which usually means major overall purpose and objective, something larger. And then you have shu. Shu means something technical, regulations, institutions. So above this, there is a Dao, the purpose of everything. So in the case of China, if you look at the role of the Chinese Communist Party, CPC, every 5 years, it holds this National People's Congress. It will examine this Dao and the Shu. If there is elements in terms of Shu, regulations, institutions, procedures that are not in line with the overall purpose, the Dao, then they should be reformed. So this is a challenge, for instance, for the United States. If you look at the opinion surveys, most Americans want to have gun control. But there's no way for the last 100 years, no way to reform this. Why? Because it is in the second article of the US Constitution. And in American political context, not only today, but even some time before, there's no way to revise the Constitution. It's too demanding, it's too difficult, even the partisan rivalry there. So there's no way to reform this whole article. In other words, if in the case of China, we have a Dao, something larger than this particular rules in the Constitution, then we can modify it. So I think this idea of Dao, something bigger, overall purpose, and Shu, something smaller.
Professor Zhang, I think we have some technical problem. Raven, the problem is on the side of
Yes, sir. It's on his end.
yeah. Perhaps let's wait for Professor Zhang. Yeah, we have a technical problem from Beijing. So let's just wait for them to get back into our Zoom forum. The Chinese embassy is in touch with the assistant of Professor Zhang. Okay. Professor Zhang, you're back on now. Yeah,
Yes.
perhaps you would
I
like
can
to
hear you, no
continue.
problem.
Yeah.
Right. 他说是我们这边的问题，就是刚才说不稳定。那我看那个都连着，信号是连着。Wait, is it okay now?
Yes, it's okay. We can hear you.
Okay, okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My answer to the last question.
Okay. The next question. For the first time in many centuries, we see China rising as a non-Western power through modernization with a totally different cultural tradition. How can China and the United States avoid falling into the Thucydides trap, wherein a rising power invariably comes into conflict or even war with the existing world power?
Actually, I know very well Professor Grant Allison, who wrote this whole piece on Thucydides trap. We had a discussion 2 years back, and I said the 16 cases you mentioned in your book where military confrontation occurred in most cases in 14 cases were actually based on what I call the zero-sum game or zero-sum culture. And the Chinese culture is really very different. And we have this not zero-sum game, but win-win game. This is very much in the Chinese culture and civilization. I gave him an example. I said, look at the European history. Because of this zero-sum culture, you have religious wars for over 1,000 years. But in the case of China, we have other wars, but no religious wars. One reason is different religions can coexist and even to some extent learn from each other. Of course, there is one important feature in China's religious tradition. Religion is a way of life, is your belief. It cannot intervene in political life. So this is very secular. So this is why I think China and the United States, if we can embrace this win-win culture rather than zero-sum game, we can avoid this kind of crises. And I said, repeated to my American friends, I said, during the Cold War, there was no military conflict between the United States and Soviet Union. But in Asia, unfortunately, we had the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Both involved direct military confrontation between China and the United States. Actually, the United States lost the wars. I think we, in the 21st century, when Sino-US relations are already intertwined, and Sino-US trade was 100 times larger than, say, 4 decades ago, there is every reason we embrace win-win culture rather than we embrace new Cold War. And as we all know, Cold War was based on premises called the what's called the assured destruction. Yeah. And I think we should have assured prosperity. We have every reason to do that. Mutually assured destruction. That's the message of the Cold War. M-A-D, mad. I said China and the United States in the 21st century, we should embrace mutually assured prosperity, MAP. We have every reason to do that. This is my key message to my American friends. Otherwise, the United States will make historical mistake.
Yes, mutually assured prosperity. That's much better than MAD, mutually assured destruction. Yes. Thank you, Professor Zhang. One last question, because our time is running out. From your perspective, what can an organization like APCU do to further promote people-to-people relations between China and the Philippines?
Well, I think, APCU has already done quite a lot, improving people-to-people understanding between our two countries. And I think it's crucial, in the 21st century for our two countries to know each other better, especially at the people-to-people level, economically, socially, culturally, academically. You have done a lot of exchanges, which I've read a bit. I think it's impressive. I hope you will continue to do that. I'm also glad, at this stage, former President Arroyo, great friend of Chinese people, is serving as honorary president, which is great, and her contribution is much appreciated. So I hope this institution, this association will do more, and hopefully when the COVID-19 is over, please come to Shanghai. We have a off-the-line conference here in Shanghai. Thank you.
Yes, we will do that once this COVID is over. Definitely, APCU will schedule exchanges and visits to Shanghai and learn more from you. Thank you, Professor Zhang. Napoleon Bonaparte once described China as a sleeping giant. For when she awakes, she will shake the world. In a mere 40 years since the opening up of China by Mr. Deng Xiaoping, China has become modernized and is on track to become the biggest economy in the world in the next few years. We hope that we in the Philippines can also adopt some of the best economic practices to speed up our recovery from COVID. As your forum moderator and president of APCU, I would like to formally close this virtual event by expressing our utmost gratitude to the following: to our honorable guest speaker, Professor Zhang Weiwei, former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, Ambassador Huang Xilian, thank you for your help. Allow me also to mention my co-officers from APCU, headed by Chairman Secretary Raul Lambino, who is indisposed today because he's recovering from COVID. APCU members, officers, and guests from the different local and international organizations who stand as witnesses to this insightful and productive event. This would not be successful without you. To everyone else, you have our sincerest appreciation for taking part in forwarding the aim to promote people-to-people relations between Philippines and China through cultural, academic, and business visit exchanges through forums, including the Manila Forum for Philippines-China Relations, which provide a high-level dialogue and platform for discussing and understanding bilateral issues. Long live the friendship, understanding, and cooperation between Philippines and China. Mabuhay. Stay safe, everyone. See you on the next Zoom forum. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.
孙教授，感谢啊，这个拨冗这么珍贵的时间给我们做了一个。